The Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever, the impetus for a stark, transformative shift in not just the Beatles' songwriting, but pop music. Cerebral and introspectively woven lyrics colored by visionary and, in retrospect, anticipatory instrumentation. Too few pieces of art can elicit such reverence from its audience, and half a century later, Strawberry Fields Forever hangs like a sign with the words, "This is where music changed forever." Today we'll be discussing again the origin, the meaning, and the challenge that was the Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever. Let me take you down. John Lennon, the main composer of Strawberry Fields, enlisted his childhood memories for these lyrics as it began all those years ago when he was just a boy growing up in Liverpool. Just a 5-minute walk from John's house in Menlove Avenue loomed the large Victorian building called Strawberry Fields. It sat upon an expansive wooded piece of land on Beaconsfield Road and was used as the Salvation Army's community home for children. John's Aunt Mimi would often take him there. Gothic, foreboding, and wild, the unmanicured, mysterious garden fascinated John. Discovering that there was a direct path from his garden to Strawberry Fields, John found it a place where he could be alone, where he could escape. John's future bandmate and friend Paul McCartney recalls how John saw his secluded, enchanted getaway. Paul says, "I've seen Strawberry Fields described as a dull, grimy place next door to him that John imagined to be a beautiful place. But in the summer, it wasn't dull and grimy at all. It was a secret garden. John's memory of it wasn't to do with the fact that it was a Salvation Army home. That was up at the house. There was a wall you could bunk over, and it was a rather wild garden. It wasn't manicured at all, so it was easy to hide in. The bit he went into was a secret garden, like in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and he thought of it like that. It was a little hideaway for him, where he could maybe have a smoke, live his dreams a little, so it was a getaway. It was an escape for John." It's difficult to claim when any song really begins for an artist. This one arguably had its roots ever since John entered his secret garden. However, the first documented whisper of Strawberry Fields was heard in September 1966. John was in the south of Spain filming the movie How I Won the War. John shared a rental house with his co-star Michael Crawford in Santa Isabella. It was there Michael heard John's faint exploration of the song. Michael says, "John was a very enigmatic character. There was not a lot revealed freely. He was writing Strawberry Fields. He sat himself in his bedroom and worked out melodies on his guitar. I heard him playing the same bar over and over again until he got the right sequence. It was interesting listening to how a song was written. At the time, I learned nothing about why these lyrics existed or why he was writing them. He used to sit cross-legged on the beach or on the bed, the two places where one would see him with a guitar. And he would go, 'Strawberry Fields Forever.' Well, I'm not sure. And I'd say, 'Oh, it's great, John, really, it's good. I wouldn't mess with it. It just sounded so great.' And he's going, 'I'm not sure, I'm not sure.'" This repetition of the only verse John had can be heard in his demo recording, but it is remarkable how keen John was to get his lyrics perfect. Where previously many of John and Paul's songs were written rather quickly, the two lobbing ideas at one another and volleying chords, John sought out to ensure these lyrics had all the time they needed. John says, "We were in Almeria, and it took me 6 weeks to write the song. I was writing it all the time as I was making the film. And anybody knows that film work, there's a lot of hanging around. I have an original tape of it somewhere, of how it sounded before it became the psychedelic sounding song it became on the record." Ruminating on his own history and life, as he had done in songs before and after, like In My Life, Julia, and A Day in the Life, John mentioned Strawberry Fields to be along with help on the few true songs he has ever written. Writing from experience and not projecting himself into a situation. John says, "The second line goes, 'No one I think is in my tree.' Well, what I was trying to say in that line is nobody seems to be as hip as me. Therefore, I must be crazy or genius. It's the same problem as I had when I was 5. There is something wrong with me because I seem to see things other people don't see. Am I crazy or am I a genius? What I'm saying is, in my insecure way, is nobody seems to understand where I'm coming from. I seem to see things in a different way from most people." Strawberry Fields was a psychoanalysis, set to music really. I think most analysis is just symptomatic, where you just talk about yourself. And I don't need to do that because I've done a lot of it with reporters. I never had time for psychiatrists and those people, because they're all cracked. Instead of penting up emotion or pain, feel it rather than put it away for a rainy day. I think everyone's blocked. I haven't met anybody that isn't a complete blockage of pain from childhood, from birth on. Why shouldn't we cry? They tell us to stop crying about 12. Be a man. What the hell's that? Men hurt. As the Beatles, George Martin, and engineers, including Geoff Emerick, reconvened in the studio, the band established quite succinctly and unanimously that now that they were no longer touring, they could record music that wasn't intended for live performances. A new kind of record with new kinds of songs. Producer George Martin, at the end of this illuminating meeting, responds, "Right then, let's get to work. What have you got for me?" Geoff Emerick recalls Paul starting to speak, but John beat him to the punch, hollering, "I've got a good one for a starter." Geoff recalls Paul with a half smile, shrugged his shoulders, and backed down. Geoff also remembers the incredible moment when John Lennon showed his world Strawberry Fields for the first time. And this, my friends, has got to be the most haunting quote I've ever seen in relation to music. Geoff says, "Down in the studio, George Martin was perched, as usual, on his high stool, positioned in the midst of the four Beatles. John was standing directly in front of him, playing an acoustic guitar and singing softly. Because he wasn't close to any of the microphones we had arranged around the room, I had to push the faders up quite high to hear him. From the very first note, it was obvious that this new Lennon song was a masterpiece. He had created a gentle, almost mystical tribute to some mysterious place, a place called Strawberry Fields. I had no idea what the lyrics were about, but the words were compelling, like abstract poetry. And there was something magical in the spooky, detached timbre of John's voice. When he finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, broken by Paul, who in a quiet, respectful tone said simply, 'This is absolutely brilliant.' Most of the times when Lennon played one of his songs for us for the first time on acoustic guitar, we'd all think, wow, that's great. But this song was clearly something special. I brought a tape demo of the song with me too, John said, offering to play it, but everyone agreed there was no need. They wanted to get straight into recording. The energy in the room was staggering. It was almost as if the band's creative energy had been bottled up for too long. There is an assumed risk when one decides to push boundaries. If you fail, you may as well be pushing daisies. But this is where the Beatles flourished, and in no small part to the iconic addition of the Mellotron, played and composed by Paul McCartney, or so we think. John acquired this beast of an instrument in the summer of 1965, but it had not been brought into the studio until the days of recording Strawberry Fields. John described it as a machine some guy in Britain invented and had tape loops on jazz bands, trumpets, flutes, and rhythm sections on it. Each key triggered a loop of a real instrument that played the equivalent note. Much like today with a MIDI keyboard, but way more obnoxious. But Geoff Emerick mentions that the big breakthrough that night was Paul coming up with that stunning Mellotron line that opens the song. Paul's inspiration really set the stage. It was Paul, as usual, who discovered the musical potential instead of just the novelty value. Within a remarkably short time, he worked out an arrangement that beautifully complemented Lennon's haunting vocal line. But even though Paul brought it in and changed the game, it has to be mentioned that in the Beatles movie, The First US Visit, filmed in 1964, years before Strawberry Fields, John can be heard playing a melodeon with strikingly similar notes to Paul's Mellotron introduction. The question is, did John actually come up with it and Paul simply remembered it unconsciously and put it to use?
8 o'clock, channel 2 and 3. Do you want to follow this? Channel 2. I made 5, 6.
Strawberry Fields was one of the most complicated Beatles recordings to date, with George Martin not only creating the arrangements for the orchestra, but spending a whopping 55 hours of studio time completing the song. Not to mention, it was also recorded over 8 different dates. With endless revisions and different hands in the pot, the song became a creature of its own. Some days overdubs, others orchestra, Mellotron, backing vocals, all this leading to John finally saying he liked both the takes they did on November 29th. The more intense take, and he told George Martin he would like a combination of the 2 takes. Here's the problem with that. George Martin says to John, there are 2 things against it. They are in different keys and different tempos. Apart from that, we're fine. Well, John said, you can fix it. George Martin and Geoff Emerick began studying the tapes at John's outlandish request. The takes were a semitone apart, but if they sped up the first version and slowed down the other, they could make a match. George says, with the grace of God and a bit of luck. You can hear this edit at 60 seconds into the song right before the words going to in the second chorus, where the 2 takes were merged. That is insane considering the limitations of technology at the time. Honestly, now if I had to do something like that, I would have a panic attack. After deciding that their next single was a double A-side featuring Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, the Beatles created promotional films for both songs. Directed by Swedish director Tommy Bramwell, Strawberry Fields took place mainly around a dead oak tree in Knoll Park in Sevenoaks, Kent, owned by the National Trust. They intended for there to be a sequence where Paul would drop down from a tree, but the lighting was less than optimal on their first day. On the final day of filming, they were able to nail the drop and reverse it in post, making it seem Paul had leapt into the tree. While filming the promo, as luck usually has a way of showing up when you least expect it, John took a break from filming Strawberry Fields and strolled into an old antique shop nearby the park, only to purchase a circus poster dating back to the mid-1800s. The poster advertised a circus in Rochdale and would later be the inspiration for Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. John really did have a way of letting chance kind of guide his songwriting. George Martin was a genius and integral to making the Beatles grow and develop into the musicians we know today. But that doesn't mean mistakes don't happen. There's a saying, the master has failed more times than the apprentice has tried. Well, the master George Martin regretted his decision to make a double A-side album with Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane. George Martin says, "The idea of a double A-side came from me and Brian. Brian was desperate to recover popularity, and so we wanted to make sure that we had a marvelous seller. He came to me and said, 'I must have a really great single. What have you got?' I said, 'Well, I've got 3 tracks, and 2 of them are the best tracks they've ever made. We could put the 2 together and make a smashing single.' We did, and it was a smashing single, but it was also a dreadful mistake. We would have sold far more and got higher up in the charts if we had issued one of those with, say, 'When I'm 64' on the back. With its release, the single failed to top the singles chart, the first time for a Beatles single since Please Please Me." Nothing goads Beatles fans into discord than the utterance of the Paul is dead conspiracy. Cranberry sauce being reversed sounds a lot like, well, we won't get into that. But why exactly is John saying cranberry sauce? Well, a little fact I think is just charming is that they were recording the song around the time of the American Thanksgiving holiday. They had all been chatting about turkey and all the trimmings and how Americans traditionally ate such a meal at that time of year. Jeff Emmerich recalls saying, "That's the way John was. He'd often work little phrases or snatches of conversation about something he had been recently reading or talking about into the music he was recording." I'm sorry to disappoint anyone who ever bought into this rubbish, but Paul was, in fact, very much alive and well, and there was never any kind of plan to fool the public by scattering clues about his supposed demise. Strawberry Fields. For those of you who have been with the channel since the beginning, you may remember we've done an episode on it before, but I've just been in a lyrical rut. I'm currently working on my second album. The music is coming. It's relentless, but I find myself second-guessing the lyrics. I'm asking a lot more of myself, it seems. I don't know what I'm looking for, just something honest, and my mind just started flitting back to that song. The way John spoke, honestly, without hesitation, but curated that hesitancy into an unforgettable and moving piece of music. These videos not only exist as my job, but another part of my writing process. I get insight into songs I love from composers I admire, and of course I can't very well sit next to them and ask them anything. I have to listen, which is hard when all you really want to do is sing. Well, that's all for today, everyone. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Speaking of my music, you can check it out on Spotify, Apple, etc. You can support the channel on Patreon for like $1, and I'll see you next time.